Hey guys, today is going to be another replay review. In this case, we're looking at a Kael'Thas in around gold in Europe, I believe. I think it's around gold. So, Kael'Thas is one of my favorite heroes in the game. I love his kit. I feel like it fits so many different things. He generally isn't played in the competitive scene because he's a little risky. You want to be getting a lot of globes. You have a long cooldown instead of an escape. You have a long cooldown. You don't do quite as much burst as the people who are as risky as him. And a lot of what he does requires the enemies to make mistakes. The only reason why I have recommended him for competitive games, I don't know if you're like setting up your Netflix before you get going, but if you're queuing for ranked, you generally want to be here at the start of the game, especially as Kael'Thas, because you want to be getting globes. The only reason I've recommended him to teams in competitive games has been situations where you need a follow-up CC for your team comp that you can't get from elsewhere. A great example is if you want to run Rhaegar and you want to run like a setup, like a Varian Taunt, but you don't know what mage to pick to follow up the Varian. Kael'Thas can be really good because you can follow up with enough burst to do about 60-70% of someone's health, and you can follow up with a 1 to 1.5 second stun. So, early game on Kael'Thas should be double soaking and getting as many globes as possible. So right now you're doing that. You soaked one wave top, you went mid, you got another globe, and you're going to catch top. It looks like you'll be able to catch it right there. Now, one quick thing. If you want to clear waves a little bit more efficiently, if you do trait W and then Q, your W will cost no mana. Your Q will kill the middle minion, so if you throw your W on the middle minion, that'll also automatically explode. And you can clear an entire wave with only using a Q worth of mana. And it's all in an instant, so you can double soak really easily. In fact, when they put the teleporters on Warhead Junction, Kael'Thas is wave clear so quick that I said I bet I could triple soak. And so I told my friends to play a 4-person kill comp, and I was going to play KT, and I was going to triple soak. And I triple soaked on Warhead Junction while my friends just went around trying to kill the enemy people and steal their camps. That I ended off, I think we won before level 20. I want to say we were like 16, they were like 14, and I had 76 globes. Because I was able to clear the waves so fast and just keep going from lane to lane to lane. And the more globes you get, the more mana you have, and the more mana you get back from getting globes. So every globe I got would give me like 4 abilities worth of mana, and I was just endlessly triple soaking for my team. Your camp clear is relatively slow until you get to about 13 where you get the basic cooldown reduction. So I generally recommend just double soaking all game and using your E to protect you in case people try to jump on you while you're rotating. But for Storm League, which is what you're in Gold Storm League, you should be getting as much double soaking as possible. Your power spike is 16, but there are some combos that you should know and practice when you do approach team fights. The reason I love Kael'Thas so much is you can adjust your combos based off what you need in the team. I used to play Ryze and I used to play Brand in League of Legends a lot before I switched to Heroes of Storm. And what I loved about Kael'Thas, and again, your Q, you don't need the empowered Q, because if you aim it right, you could hit all 3 of those backliners, the middle one, and 1 or 2 of the frontliners without needing to do the empowered Q. And then there's only a couple frontliners to kill, and you would use less mana because you're going to use your Living Bomb. Also, your Living Bomb will have a shorter cooldown because it doesn't put it on a cooldown. But yeah, I used to play like Ryze and Brand, and I loved them because you could change the combo, the order of your abilities, to change what you do in a team fight. And I love that with Kael'Thas too. If you need to stun someone longer or stun an entire team for 1.5 seconds, that's a huge stun. That's longer than an ETC slide. You could almost have an ETC slide on an assassin, which is awesome. Or you want more damage, you do trait WW and then a Q. If you want to hit more people, you do trait Q into WE, right? So there's so many different combos. Do you want to hit everyone for less damage? Do you want to hit a few people for more damage? Or do you want to CC people for longer? CCs are really valuable. Now, I will say, I generally play a little bit more selfish when I play KT. I don't use trait E very often when I'm playing in Storm League, but when I'm playing competitive, I do. When I first was playing competitive, this was a long time ago, but I was actually a mage player before I was a support player, and I played a lot of Kael'Thas. I played a lot of Kael'Thas and a lot of Jaina. So I would be selfish. I'll talk more about the build right after this objective, but what you want to be doing on Kael'Thas most of the time during objectives is early game objectives, you want to do a lot of trait Ws. So I would try to interrupt this with, assuming you went level 4, the increased range, I would interrupt it with an E, because it's one of your longer range abilities and it would CC him. Then I would use trait Ws, because during these early game fights, no one has their ult, so fights tend to draw on for a long time. So trait W allows you for the most DPS, right? You're taking your living bomb and you're making it, instead of a 10-second cooldown, you're making it a 6-second cooldown, because you're doing trait, which makes your W have no cooldown and no mana cost. So you do a trait, and then for your E, I like to always combo it with a Q so that I'm never missing my Q damage. So every fight for me looks like throw E, see if it lands, throw Q, trait W, auto attack, auto attack, auto attack, and then if we're winning the fight, I'll throw a second W really quick. If the fight's still going, I hold my W until my next trait, and then I'll do a trait W and maybe throw a second W to try to overwhelm the team. And that's how I approach fights early game with KT. And this is really important because if you use a trait Q, now you're missing a full W worth of damage. Because you could have just done trait WW instead of a traded Q. And since you're only hitting one person with your Q, and if he dashes, you're hitting no one with your Q, it's not worth it. And that's why I use my E to guarantee that my Q will land, and I'll use my trait W so that I keep my DPS high during the early portions of a fight. So now you did a W, but you have your trait, and your W's on a long cooldown. So there's not much you can do for the rest of this fight. And so your early game is very limited. Now, the way that you're playing KT would be perfectly fine at level 16. And KT is one of those difficult heroes to coach. I always say, like, Rhaegar and KT are very difficult to coach because they shift from their early game to their late game heavily. Rhaegar, you should be playing very aggressive in your early game and very passive in your late game. KT, you need to be playing very aggressive in frontline and more focused on DPS than burst. Where late game, you're more focused on burst than DPS and playing safe. So do you see during like that entire 10-second period, you did nothing. You literally did nothing. But if you would have trait W'd him, then you could have been auto-attacking him, and you would have had your W available to cast it again if you wanted to, or you could have waited for your trait to come back up. And so you would have at least had something else to do during that time. But you went a full 10 seconds where he was just attacking you. That was a good CC. Okay, you guys have already won the fight. In previous videos, I've said when you've already won or you've already lost, you want to leave the fight. Generally with Assassins, you don't do this. This is usually solo anything, but because you're solo queuing in Storm League, you need to be out. So this is great timing. Now you want to blow up the wave instantly. How do you blow up the wave instantly? Trait WQ. And then you mount up and you leave. Trait WQ. Your team's getting this, so you're going to head mid after this. Trait WQ, mount up. Go mid, trait WQ, mount up, go top, trait WQ, mount up, go mid, trait WQ, and that's it. The reason I was able to triple soak when they did the change to Warhead is because you could go mid, bot, portal, top, mid, bot, portal, and so you could basically go around in a circle almost, rather than having to do it differently. You grab the extra. The wave, your team doesn't go for the bruiser, which is fine. It's less risk. Make sure that your Q hits all the backline minions. You don't need to worry about it hitting all the frontline minions because your minions are going to be damaging the frontline minions anyways. Make sure that you're hitting all the backline minions. So I always trait W the mage minion. I make sure that my Q hits all the backline and as many frontline as I can. I wouldn't stay because you're missing soak top. Like, I wouldn't have even stayed for the second wave. But you could potentially destroy something. I would throw like a W here. This looks like it's already going to die. when you're going for your level 7 talent, it's always tricky to pick a good 7 talent. If they only have a single frontliner, I like to get Sunfire sometimes, because once the single frontliner goes in, then you're safe to get 2 auto attacks. If they're heavy on frontline, Burn Flesh is really good. And if they're heavy, if they're kind of a mixed match of frontline and backline, then I'll usually go Sun King's Fury, because then if you damage their frontline with W's, then they'll probably go back and hit more people. Even the best teams sometimes have a hard time spreading, because it changes their positioning. They want to position a certain way, and if they break their positioning because of Sun King's Fury, then your team should be able to capitalize. So in this game, if you look at it, they have 2 frontliners, and that's it. They don't have more than 2 frontliners. So I probably wouldn't go Burn Flesh, because the odds of these 2 people being next to each other every... Oh, they have 3. Yeah, I think Burn Flesh is fine. I forgot about Kael'Thas. Yeah, triple frontline, I think Burn Flesh is fine. Triple frontline, it's also good to go Sun Kings, though, because you could just throw your W on their frontline, and it's hard for them to get away. I would never go Sunfire into triple frontline. That was really good. And again, this is kind of my area where I get a little selfish. And the reason I get a little selfish is I understand you wouldn't have landed that without using the trade on your E, but because your team doesn't generally follow up on your E's in Storm League, it's risky to use your trait on your E. I would find you do more damage just throwing a trait W on him, and then saving your E for when it's easier to land, throw your E on someone else, and then do a QW. If you would have done a trait W here, an EQ W here, you would have done more damage in the team fight, and likely led to more value than doing a trait E here, because you're the only one that was on that target. That's why I generally don't use trait E unless I'm like with a friend that I know will follow up on that 1.5 second stun. And like, you don't have the second W now, so you couldn't bring that much more damage to that fight. This is risky. You guys both lost as many people. That was good. It was a trait W. Oh yeah, you guys have to back up. Lucio wanted to heal everyone, but you're full health, so that's okay. Ooh, that was interesting. Again, you use trait Q to interrupt, but it's really these early fights you have to be doing trait Ws. I know I'm harping on it a lot, but that's where most of your early game damage comes from. Like, you do have one of the best stuns in the game, but still. To talk a little bit about the level 4 talents too, if you're not in competitive, you don't need Netherwind. But Netherwind is good if the other 2 don't get value. So I never take Mana Tap, because if you're taking Mana Addict, you should never have mana problems. But Energy Royal is good if they have a lot of divers. So like in the case of Karazim jumping on you, it drops your E down to like a 5-second cooldown. So I don't know if Karazim's going to jump on you, but if they ever have like a Greymane or someone who's just going to be constantly jumping on you, I like to have Energy Royal, because I could every 5 seconds I can CC someone. But I would say 9 times out of 10 I'd take Nether. Just because that extra range makes it really easy to combo and get people. Seed spawning bot, I wouldn't stay here very long. That was huge. Oh, and a Pyroblast to follow up too. That was a combo right there. So there's a pretty strong combo that you did almost perfectly, I think. The combo goes a little differently early game. So the way the combo generally works early game is you'll trait W, E, Q, R. Your E guarantees your Q is going to land. And the reason why you do a trait W here is because when you're... if that person stays in the fight rather than runs away, because sometimes when people are getting pyroblasted, they're like, I just need to stay in the fight. You get to throw a second W. And that's the only reason why the combo could have been done just a tad differently. But the trait E wouldn't have landed if you didn't do a trait E. The E wouldn't have landed if you didn't do a trait E. So overall, that was awesome. So with KT, if you can get good at those combos and do them effectively, it's like one of the few ways of carrying games with KT. You double soak early game, so you win it with macro. When you hit level 13, you can start doing cams. And when you start hitting 16, you should be constantly comboing. And your combo at 16 is pretty straightforward. If you hit a backliner with your Q, you can immediately Pyroblast. But this guy did go Palm. So this is usually, again, another situation I told in another video. I said, if the enemy has a Karazim, you want to wait to see what the ult is. If he goes Palm, I would never go Pyroblast. I would never go Pyroblast if he goes Palm, because he can save every Palm for Pyroblast, and Palm is a 50-second cooldown, and Pyroblast is a 100-second cooldown. So I would have held it, and I would have gone Phoenix. And Phoenix is pretty good on this map, because you can throw a Phoenix every time you have a Garden Terror, because you can throw the Garden Terror where the plant is, and then only their range can kill the plant, because their melee would take too much damage. So I would never take Pyroblast in this game. And I would hold it to see if he takes Palm first. But I do understand, like, you kind of snap picked it. You hit level 10 and then you comboed someone really quick. But now you have to wait until Palm goes out before you Pyroblast. Or you have to wait until you kill a Karazim. So, go back to soaking. You want to hit 13. So I would be leaving. They're going to clear bot, so I would go top. Sonya's going to clear top, so I would go bot. You know, like, I would always be adjusting based on how the fight's going. But yeah, now you're 13, you can do camps. The reason why you generally have to wait to be 13 to do camps is because you can trait WQ, and then when your Q's almost back off cooldown, you can throw your second W. But to be honest, the easiest thing in my opinion is just trait WW and then you throw out a Q. Or Q and then trait WW, because your W, throwing 2 Ws will fully refresh a third W. So you do trait WW, of course your Q needs to go out first, like Q, trait WW, and then, I don't know, I'm making this so complicated, but it'll fully reset your W off of having both of those Ws out, and then you'll be able to throw a third one right afterwards. And at level 13, 3 Ws generally is enough to clear Siege Camp, and then for Bruiser Camp you just do 1 more W, which will be a lower cooldown, and you'll probably even have your trade up by that time, so you can do 3 more Ws if you wanted to. That's how effective it is. I'll show how it's done, because I feel like I made this way more confusing than it has to be. Pyroblast. We know Palm is still up, so he palms. He's saving Palm just for you. Like, he lets someone else on his team die because he's saving Palm purely for Pyroblast. Just clear bot. I don't think you can win the objective without a healer against a Li Ming. Again, trait WW is more damage than trait Q. Once you hit 16, that's when things shift. Right, you'll do trait Q because landing your Flame Strike is worth more than, because you're getting a free W, right? So trait WW, you get a free W and a smaller Q. When you get Ignite, trait Q gives you a free W, and then you get a larger Q. So it's just worth more in general. Use a trait Q once you get Ignite. Fury of the Sunwell, I only take in basically 2 scenarios. 1, they have double tank bruiser, or 2, they have bruiser they have tank double bruiser. So 3 beefy friend line. That's the only time I take Fury of the Sunwell, because burn flesh gets a lot of value. Every other time I take Ignite. And if you're going to take Ignite, it does give Sun King's Fury more value. Nice job. Could be a kill. 1 more W and just walk away. Oh, they're fighting, so you just rejoin. You got Ignite. You missed your E, you back away. You can throw a W if you want to lower the cooldown of your Q. If you're ever waiting for your Q, you can just throw a quick W. Keep in mind, your level 13 doesn't need to hit heroes. It's just W gets value. The other thing too, something to think about that a lot of people forget is if you do ever take Sun King's Fury, the spread damage is worth more than the actual W. So what a lot of people will do, a lot of good KT players will do, is on a low health minion, they'll throw a W on it, then they'll trait Q next to a hero. The trait Q will hit them, and then the explosion will hit them, and they'll get a W on them too. That's before level 16, but a little tricky. I didn't go Cocoon. Be careful about trait queuing people who can dash or teleport. Like, it's almost better to just trait queue frontliners. Don't get me wrong. If you can trait Q onto a Li Ming and then Pyroblast, she basically just dies. Especially if she goes Glass Cannon. That's literally all you have to do if she goes Glass Cannon. She did not go Glass Cannon. She didn't go Spell Armor either, so. But yeah, trait Q Pyroblast is really strong when you have level 16. Because you're basically landing a Q, a W, and Pyroblast scales off of level higher than people's health scales. I also like melee Pyroblast sometimes, especially if they're against Palm, because what's going to happen is he's going to go to Palm the person you're Pyroblasting, and then you're going to hit 3 people with Pyroblast. Because Pyroblast won't have a travel time, so melee Pyroblast in a situation like that's pretty good. That actually was interesting. Because you Pyroblasted the Anubarak, so Kael'Thas or Karazim didn't know who to palm, so he palmed someone else. You just used Pyroblast for damage there, which is interesting. Oh, you just... I shouldn't have... Tracer walked... Or not Tracer, Li Ming walked back into that. But overall, I mean, you're playing your level 16 pretty well. Your early game, you played the macro pretty well, but you could be more efficient for sure. Your team fights early game, you need to really use trait W more. Unless you're with someone that you know will always follow up your E, and then you can always do your trait E. Because trait E QW is going to do like almost enough damage, and if you have someone assisting, you'll usually get the kill. If you have no one assisting, you just do more damage by doing 2 Ws.
I feel a seed germinate. Are you ready for it?
Yeah. Camps are faster after 13, so it's pretty good to go for camps. You got 30 globes, so you've got a good shield in case someone dives on you. You can also play a little more aggressive with a shield like that. You can play for greedier plays if you need to. Enemies are playing kind of weird. I mean, it's like gold. But even in gold, I figured someone would just face check something. They're playing really safe. Where are you going? No, you should be joining the fight. Yeah, you not being there was pretty bad. So, unlike Cursed Hollow, I see what you might do. You might go back and grab the curse while your team's fighting, so you'll lose the fight, but then you at least get the curse, or the tribute. But on this map, you can't get this alone without taking a ton of damage and taking a long time. So you always want to be with your team, or you want to ping them away, so that like before they go into a fight. If you really don't want to fight, you need to be pinging them away. But instead, you didn't do either. You didn't get the objective, and you didn't help your team. You know? So now you can't get either. Now you're going to lose a team fight and an objective, all because of hesitation. I don't know if you would have won that fight. Honestly, that fight looked pretty bad. It was closer to their area. They could run and grab fountains in the middle of the fight. You guys couldn't. It was just a bad fight. But you didn't tell your team to back off. Yeah. Like... I definitely think you saw that it was a bad fight, and you didn't want to join that fight, and then you backed away, but they didn't, so they all died, and so I don't know. Sometimes, like, if your team's all doing something bad, you still have to join because there's a chance you win, because everything's so inefficient in these ranks that even if your team's doing something bad, you might still win a bad play because the enemies are just bad, you know? But if you don't tell your team it's a bad play, if you don't V-ping like all around them, then they're just gonna go do it anyways. I always say, like, if you don't tell your team what to do, they're gonna do something stupid. Great, E, Q, W. You applied W to the target that got hit by your Q. So it just made it to where you didn't have level 16 talent, but it's not the end of the world. I'd rather you do that than nothing. Alright, you can Pyroblast people now. He won't die from Pyroblast, but it gets him out of the fight forever. Nice job. That's Rag. You want to back away. You don't want to fight under Rag if you don't have to. And again, this is where you're hesitating, right? Your team's fighting. Yes. You're seeing the same thing I'm seeing. You're seeing that we shouldn't be fighting under Rag trait, right? And your team's not seeing that. And this is where there's frustration in like lower ranks, because I understand where you're frustrated. This is a bad fight to take. Your whole team could have just walked away, helped Murden clear this, and won the objective for free because you guys killed their tank. But your team instead got greedy, decided to fight under a Rag trait, and now you need to make the decision. Do you join them under the Rag trait, fight a disadvantaged 4v4, or do you go and like help Murden? I would probably just let these three die, and then you can go help Murden and you win the objective. But because of the hesitation of you not sure if you should be following or if you should be going to help Murden, you stood here for a little too long, and you're going to lose both again. The Murden wasn't able to clear those in time, and your team died under the Rag. So you guys took a winning fight over Chase and then ended up losing. The people that did Chase, just so you're aware, all of them had escapes, right? So you don't have escapes. So whenever people are over chasing and you're playing KT, the best thing is just find something else to get value over. Like, you could try to throw like a really long range trait Q to assist, but that's all you can really do. So this one actually paid off. But your hesitation is definitely where it's challenging. You need to look at it and go, what can KT do well? And am I doing the best thing for what I do well? KT clears waves really fast. KT's great in like tight fights. KT is bad at chasing, right? The best you can do is follow up with like a Q and then walk away. Otherwise, all your abilities are relatively low range. Level 20, there are a few talents you can take. Flamethrower is the main talent that people recommend. To be completely honest, I don't actually mind Presence of Mind, especially if they've got a Palm, because he's going to Palm right before Pyroblast hits, and he'll probably get hit by it as well because of the increased radius. And then you lower the cooldown by 20 seconds, and you still do a bunch of damage, and you burn Palm, you know? This fight's kind of weird because you can only add Qs to the fight. But you do have Flamethrower. Flamethrower is like the default talent, though. I take Flamethrower more often than not because it adds such a low cooldown. And anytime that you can do one of those, where you do like an EQ without needing to use your trait, then you'll have your trait available. You'll have your Q available at the same time as your trait. The worst part about Flamethrower is if you hit 2 people with your trait Q, then your Q ends up being a lower cooldown than your trait. And you either have to wait 2 seconds so you get another trait Q, or you throw a Q that's shorter and you don't get value from Flamethrower. So if you can get like the EQs here and there, it's really a strong talent. Because the added range of Qs is just always good. Flamethrower is also really fun against Rag because you can just throw like a trait Q and just have like the tip hit it, and you can do it from like all the way over here. But just keep doing trait Qs. That's all you do here. Trait EQ is good, but when you're needing to be selfish, it's more about getting bigger Qs. Especially with Flamethrower, you want to hit 2 people to get the lower cooldown. You also want to hit 2 people to get burned flesh value. So you need to be more selfish in these fights right now. Alm's still on cooldown. That won't kill him, though. He's too high health. But, yeah, you should just be doing trait Qs as often as possible right now because your team's not following up on your trait Bs. So you got to be selfish. You got to just double soak and just do trait Q after trait Q after trait Q. Yeah, that's huge. Every time. Just keep doing it. Just another trait Q. It should be off cooldown. Off cooldown. Off cooldown. You should just constantly be throwing trait Qs. They have a Kael'Thas. He can't keep up with the healing. And he has to be near his team to heal, so he has to wait for all of your damage to go out. You should be constantly trait Qing. It should be off cooldown. Wherever you think they are, you should just be throwing it out. You don't need to use E there. You just missed out on burn flesh damage and the cooldown reduction. Just trait Q, trait Q, trait Q, trait Q. Look at that. Look at all that damage. Is he spreading? Not even... Rag had to leave the fight there so he didn't spread the bomb. Again, that was a trait E. You don't even need to do a trait E anymore. Just trait Q, trait Q, trait Q. Until this game's over. Trait Q, trait Q, trait Q. Just off cooldown. You don't need to be in range to do trait W. Just trait Q. Once you get flamethrower, it should just be off cooldown. As at max range, trait Q, off cooldown. And you should just almost never have a time where you're not throwing a trait Q. Once you get flamethrower, it should be constant. If you even know the general vicinity of the enemies, you should be throwing Qs out. Save your E and your W for if someone steps up to you. If someone steps up to you, throw an E, a W, and then lower the cooldown of your Q and throw a Q, and maybe even another W. But until then, you don't even need to use your E or your W. You literally can just trait Q off cooldown in team fights once you hit 20. Even 16, you're pretty safe to do it, but 20, you can stay so far away and just nuke people from far away. Got to be quick. The one thing you have down pretty well is combos. Like, you really like doing your combos, and I love KTs that know how to do combos. But knowing how to do it, knowing when to do it is a huge difference. Again, you did trait E there when you could have hit 3 people with your Q if you would have just done trait Q. And 3 people would have been burn flesh on 3 people. It would have been your W on 1 person. And you still would save your E because did your team follow up on that E? No. That was a great E. If you had a coordinated team right there, that's a great E because what would have happened if you had a coordinated team? Trait E, you CC him, followed by leap, followed by high five to lower the healing that he gets, followed by pulse bomb. Then he's gonna get a palm, and you'll have pyroblast ready to go, and you'll just kill the Tychus while the palm goes out on a different target. You know, it's seriously, if you're in a coordinated environment, you're playing great. But in just Gold Storm League, you just want to be selfish, throw Qs off cooldown. Just trait Q, trait Q, trait Q. Boom! Look at that. Burn Flash and W. The W's gonna spread. And guess what? Throw another one. Trait Q, trait Q. That's it. I know you're gonna hear it all day long, but oh, you could throw it farther than that. You have flamethrower. You could have thrown it in front of a Nubarok. You could pyroblast just for damage. Karazim takes a long time to heal people. The only thing is when you're this close to their fort, you got to be a little careful because just doing pyroblast for damage doesn't do anything because they can just hit fountain. You'll have to win this next objective. The cool part for you is you're still full health and you're high enough mana, you don't even need to go back here. So you can just chill and do 1 interrupt while your team backs. And that's all I would do. I'd tell your team to back, and I would just do 1 interrupt. You don't want to, you don't want to be here. She's going to die. Who auto attacks from Tychus? She does. Now she doesn't have time to back. The other thing that's cool about Flamethrower with KT is you can stay like right here, you can interrupt once with your Q, and then you can run up here, and you can walk down and do 1 more interrupt. And you can interrupt for quite a while with Flamethrower. That extra range is great. You did a W. You didn't need to do a trait W there. Just trait Qs. Once you're 16, most of your Ws are not going to be, you're not going to be in range to cast a W. So if you get a chance to cast a W, you just cast it for free. And then you use trait Qs for the rest of the game. 16, you need to be hitting someone with your Q to get value out of Ignite, or else you don't have a level 16 talent. You need to get value out of that level 16 talent. You can get in range to trait Q again, but you don't need to get too far. Yeah, that's the perfect range, and then you walk away. You do that, yep. Solid. You could even Pyroblast him, but okay. You just, I'll be honest, this fight was more Tracer's fault than it was yours. Tracer stayed, which made your Lucio need to spend all of his time healing Tracer back up, when you guys should have backed down bot, and then you should have interrupted twice while your team got back. That's what should have happened. You guys overstayed. as far as your play in that fight, you played pretty well. You just need to throw more trait Qs, especially when you get Flamethrower. But level 16, every Q needs to land on someone, or else you don't have a level 16 talent. But I will say, you had some hesitations in this game, and the hesitations did lead to your team losing a couple fights. And I understand why you had hesitations. You were making the right call by not wanting to go into the fights that your team wanted to go into, but because they were already committed to those fights, sometimes you have to still join, which sucks, because I've been there too. I've been in a situation where I'm like, I know what we're doing is wrong, but if I don't help, we're going to lose the game, you know? And so a lot of times I'll try to ping forward, like ping back if I know people are making those mistakes. I'm actually gonna, while I'm talking, I'm gonna show a couple things in try mode. But I've been there, and I've been there a lot in gold. When I do Smurf games and I'm playing in gold, I've been exactly in the situation you were in a lot, where I'm like, my whole team's making a bad decision. I shouldn't be here, and then I end up being there anyways, because I would rather die as a team than have 4 members die and I can't do anything and I'm just watching because of that off chance. Actually, let me start at level 1. Let me get rid of enemy hero for now and ally hero. Okay, so the first thing I wanted to show was what you were doing to the wave was this. You were trait Q, and then you were just like using a W and killing it. Look how much mana I used. So I'm gonna refresh forts, right? And it took longer to kill it, right? Because we waited for the W afterwards. So not only did you use more mana, but we also waited for the W afterwards. What you should be doing is trait W, and then you can aim and hit most of the minions and 1 auto, and then it's easy to clear this up. That's at level 1, right? And you can mount up even while these things are dying, and you could double soak. When you hit level 4, it's just instant, right? We'll refresh forts. It should be instant. Not even with any talents. Talents don't matter. None of your talents are going to speed up your clear. But it's just instant. And so what I did is basically this, right? I'd clear these. I would mount up as this one's dying. And then I would go to this wave. And I'd do the same thing. WQ. Auto. 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 And then I'd mount up. I'd go down to the 3rd lane. And then I'd do the same thing. Trade Q. Auto. 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 And then I would take the portal. And I would go back to the 1st lane again. This is literally how I would triple soak. Triple soaking is one of those things that's like, it's rarely needed because you should always have someone in lanes. But the strat that we were doing just worked. So in KT, he's one of the few heroes in the game that you can actually triple soak because the timing of his abilities lines up just so perfectly. And the few auto attacks is just long enough to wait for your mount cooldown to come off. So you should be getting as much soaking as possible. Then the next thing is your combos. So what you kept doing was this, which is one of my favorite combos if you're in a coordinated environment. Trait E, WQ, right? That's one of my favorite combos if you're in a coordinated environment because you're doing 1,000. Most mages at this level have 2,000 health, a little less than 2,000 health. So you're doing 60% of someone's health. If you have an ally to do 40%, that could be a tank, a healer, that could be another DPS, a bruiser, anything. That's enough to lead to a kill on anyone. And that's why this combo is so good. But if you could be a little bit more selfish and do a trait WEQ and then 3 auto attacks and another W and maybe 1 more auto attack, instead of doing the damage that you did, which is about 1,000, we're doing 1,500, almost 1,600 damage against weaker people or someone who's taken a little bit of damage before the fight started. So say you wanted to start off with a couple auto attacks just to see if you can get a few free ones on an enemy that's just sitting in lane. They're just auto attacking, and then they let you do it, and then you do this. We just killed KT. So and most people let you do that. If you walk up with a couple auto attacks first in lane, they usually let you do it. They don't think about it because they're like, you're not doing that much damage. Are you seriously auto attacking me in lane? Like, so if you're ever just in a one-on-one with someone, you just throw a few auto attacks. You just imagine, okay, I can do 1600 damage at level 4. And then you walk towards them, right? Now I'm out of mana this time, but I would throw one more W and kill him, right? And then you can go back to double soaking, right? So if all your lanes are soaked, you can get some kills, but that's why it does more damage to do it this way. So let me toggle cooldowns really quick to get my mana back, and I will send an enemy hero out. Let's see, you guys were against an Anubarak, right? And so what you were doing to Anubarak was you were throwing a W or a trait EW, and he would press his W before you would get your stun off, and then he wouldn't take any damage. But his W doesn't last long enough to stop the second one. So if instead you trait WQ and then use your E, and then you do your second W, look at how much damage we did to Anubarak. Now imagine he's shielding one of your Ws, but still you did 60% of Anubarak's health by doing 2 Ws instead of doing a just a single combo. You're doing 2. So even if he Ws one of yours, he dies to the second one. And so he doesn't die, but he takes more from the second one. This is why using your trait W for early fights is more valuable than anything else. So your biggest mistake this game was, one, playing like you're... Honestly, your biggest mistake was that you played like you were in a coordinated environment the whole game. You covered soak for your team, and you would always set up by giving a larger stun so that your team could follow up, which they didn't. And you hesitated during bad engages because you expected your team to not take bad engages. So you played like a great coordinated player, but you need to play selfish in Storm League. You need to play to get the most macro value, the most experience for your team, and you need to play to get the most damage out yourself, because you never know if the enemies are actually going to do any damage themselves. Doing the trait combo when your team can follow up is great, but if your team can't follow up, it's just a waste, you know? Fixing the way that you clear lanes all the way until like level 16, it should be trait WQ, because it just wipes the wave. Level 16 on, it should be enough damage to kill it with just a trait Q, and you should be fine. But you still might be able to land a Q without the trait on the whole wave, and then you can save your trait to get out or whatever. Your build seemed fine. I would just say if you're not going to be using trait Qs often, don't take Burn Flesh. If you're going to be comboing off one person, it's better to get a Sun King's Fury, because then there's a higher chance that's going to get more value than hitting 2 people. But yeah, late game, it should look like this. Just so you're aware, when you hit level 20, say I take all the same talents you took, right? Netherwind, Burn Flesh, we go Pyro. Oh, also, don't take Pyro if they have like a shield. Just take Phoenix. And use Phoenix off cooldown. It's great for sieging, and people usually walk away from it in team fights, so you just use it off cooldown. Pyromaniac, Ignite, and Flamethrower. The way this should work, look at your Q range, and it gets longer when you imagine that the Q is a circle, right? So when you're playing KT, you should just be constantly like this. And then we throw another Q, right? And watch the cooldown. Q will be back up for this next one. Look at how many Ws I'm spreading. And I'm not toggling cooldowns off, right? Look at how much damage I'm doing. Right? That's how team fights should go when you're playing KT. Let me toggle cooldowns really quick, get my health back. I'll just remove Anubarak. But even with someone attacking you the whole time and without a healer, like I still was able to get I did 22,000 damage. So if you imagine that, that's 4,000 damage per person. 5,000 if we're counting only 4 people. So I just did 5,000 damage per person to 4 people. That just ends the game. Sure, there were a lot of spreads in there, but even without the spreads, like you're still getting I can't throw a W on, but W, and then after your W, you're going to be getting another Q, and then after the Q, you're going to be getting another W. You know, like it's crazy. But just imagine how much they have to spread. Like, it's so much damage so fast. It's crazy. That's why you should just be throwing your Q off cooldown. Because sure, maybe you only hit one person, but even just hitting one person is still a lot of damage, right? And your cooldowns are going to line up because you're having lowered cooldown with your Pyromaniac. So even just a trait Q is going to make it to where your Q is always the same cooldown as your trait. Your Q actually comes back a tad bit earlier. And so you can always do a trait Q. But if you're hitting multiple people, you could weave in normal Qs in between. So if you trait Q, you're going to get such a low cooldown, you can throw like an extra Q with an E, and then guess what? You're going to have your trait Q back off cooldown again. So that's why you should always just be fishing for it. You're just trying over and over and over for the chance to get a trait Q. And if you get it, you just overwhelm people. When KT hits 16 and KT hits 20, he's a completely different character from the early KT. Early KT needs to be pretty close and take a lot of risks. Late KT doesn't need to take almost any risks, and it's just an overwhelming amount of damage in tight spaces. Even in outside of tight spaces, when you guys are just pushing in, you're just fishing. The chance you hit someone with a Q, it just ruins the enemy's day. Because if you hit someone with just a trait Q, the amount of damage is so high, it's almost half of a backliner's health. We have about 3,500 health. We did 1,600. That's almost half of a backliner's health off of a single ability landing. And you got to know, your cooldown's low, and you got to do that every 6 seconds. Every 6 seconds, you're fishing to do half of someone's health. And if you get lucky and hit more than one person, you've ruined their day, basically. The late game KT is a monster. He really is. And he's so far range. Like, people don't realize how far you can be. Like, you could be so far away. And you could even be farther than that. Like, the max range you can go, like, this would hit someone if they're stunned from this far away. So if they're stunned or they're immobile like that, Rag in his trait, you're safe to always just throw a Q on Rag and trait because of your range. It's crazy high. So hopefully this helped you out on KT. He's one of my favorite characters in the game because of all the different combo potential he has, and how you can change depending on how the team fights go. But you were playing so much like you were in a coordinated environment. I want you to play more selfishly. Double soak early game and play to get more damage yourself without relying on your team to join you. I would also recommend trying out Sunfire a little bit. Sunfire is really strong if the enemies only have like one frontliner and they use like their CC. Say it's a Garrosh and he already throws someone, you're safe to throw 2 auto attacks in. Well, 2 auto attacks is a lot of damage, and it gives you spell power, which could buff your Pyroblast. It gives you spell power for quite a while too. 10 seconds you gain 15% spell power, and then your Pyroblast will chunk. You had the Pyroblast combo down, which is why I didn't show it, but for those that don't know what the Pyroblast combo looks like, there's 2 versions of it. One is like early game where you don't have enough damage to kill a target with Pyroblast. So the early game combo is this. You do trait WEQ Pyroblast, and then when your W ends, you're going to throw another W. And so early game, that's enough damage to kill almost anyone in the game. Late game, you'll have enough damage to kill someone without the second W. So you'll play it a little bit safer. And so late game, all it is if you land an E, you kill a target. So it's trait EQ Pyroblast. And if you're playing against a mage, that should be enough damage to kill a mage, right? We have 3,400 health, or 3,500 health. It does 3,600. And KT has more health than like a Jaina or Li Ming. So you don't need that second W to kill a backliner. If you ever catch a backliner on their own, this is it's a pretty straightforward combo to always lead to a kill. But this needs to be like level 16 up because you need Ignite, and your Pyroblast also scales faster than people's health scales. And that's why you see like sometimes Pyroblast one-shots Li Ming's. I'll show you. I'll give you a great example of this. Let me show you Li Ming really quick. Let's go Li Ming. And so Li Ming right now at level 20. As hopefully she doesn't go glass cannon. She does go glass cannon, but that's fine. So at level 20, she has 2,300 health, right? And I do 2,100 damage. Now watch what happens when I set the level to 30. When I set the level to 30. I'm going to take all the same talents, right? Burn Flesh. We're going to go Pyroblast. We're going to go Pyromaniac. We're going to go Ignite. And Flamethrower, right? So now, my Pyroblast does 3,500 damage. And look at Li Ming's health. It's... Oh, she didn't take Glass Cannon this time, so it's going to be hard to show. But if she took Glass Cannon, the Pyroblast would have done more damage than her health in just one shot. Like, it's really funny. There are also tricks you can get a little bit of extra spell power to make it a bit more favored. You could take Fel Infusion for 4%. You could take Sunfire for 15%. So you can one-shot more people. But you really don't need to one-shot anyone with Pyroblast because we have that combo. Because we can always do the trade EQ R. And the cool part about the R, too, is R goes out while... like you almost get the full cast of Pyroblast before the stun's over. And it's enough damage to kill. So... Hopefully that gives you guys an idea of the combos that you need to do early game, the combos you need to do late game, and how you really make a difference in your game on KT. He is a double soaking monster who can triple soak on some maps, and he is really just an overwhelming hero if you can get the combos down right. He's a little less efficient in coordinated environments because the fights right now are so mobile, and the fights right now are so spread out that there are other mages that are better. But for Storm League, he is a really strong hero to be playing. I know this is a long video. KT's one of my favorites. That's why I spend so much time on him. And hopefully you guys have learned a lot. Otherwise, thank you so much for checking out this video, and feel free to check out my other ones.